Good afternoon. My name is Joseph Lloyd and welcome to No Budget Reviews, the series where we go around the country finding cars that you can buy in good condition with an MOT for under £1,000 and filming them with absolutely no money at all. So we have to use my phone, no microphones, no fancy DSLRs, nothing like that. Just good honest cars that you can buy for very little money and you can enjoy driving.
Renault, des voitures à vivre. Here we are, back in the days of Johnny and Mary by Robert Palmer and remixes by Martin Taylor, and one of the best-selling cars in France of all time. This is the second generation Renault 5, also known as the Super 5. I apologise if I start going into French. My grandfather's cousin used to own many Renaults in his time, and when we used to go over to Normandy, where he lived for many years in the early 90s, he would have stuff like this. He had a Renault Clio Energie, he had a Renault 11 Turbo, which had a variant of the engine that's in this car, and all kinds of other interesting things. This is a 1994 Renault 5 Campus. Has a 1.4 litre engine, known as the Cléon-Fonte engine, or C-Type or Sierra engine, generating, we think, around 60 horsepower. Some of the other versions of the engine developed either 68 or 70 horsepower. This is a very late example. It was made in Slovenia, not France, and really kind of was the equivalent of buying a Twingo in Britain, because we didn't get the Twingo in right-hand drive at all. You could personally import one, but yes, they weren't most common things. Renault 5 is a very long production life. The original one lasted from 72 to 85. The Super 5, I believe designed by Marcello Gandini, and with a sort of Renault 911 platform underneath, was released in 1984. Very reminiscent of a first generation car. The engineering is quite different though. It's a much more conventionally engineered car. We haven't got things like the early Renault 5, dashboard mounted gear change and things like that. This example is owned by Callum, who very recently supplied the Maestro Van den Pla that I think most of you liked a lot on No Budget Reviews. And this car will be up for sale very soon. It's a very low mileage car. It's only done about 53,000 miles, I believe, and it is in really nice condition. No central locking or anything like that. Lots of kind of cheap and flimsy plastic, but it's got a very wonderful charm to it, and I think that's why people in the 90s would have still bought these Renault 5s. The price, I seem to remember from the advertising at the time, was 5,555 on the road, which is really cheap. The modern equivalent of this car would probably be the Dacia Sandero, because that is also based on an old Renault small car platform. Nice and sort of jolly 90s fabric seat trim. You don't get 3-point seat belt in the middle of the rear, of course. No high level brake light, nothing like that. It's amazing actually, this car's got single point fuel injection, catalytic converter. Obviously earlier ones didn't have that. Original spec wheel trims. Callum's done a lot of work to this car, and it's actually come up really nicely. I know it's raining today, and so you can't appreciate the kind of quality of the paintwork that's on this, but there's no rust really anywhere on this anymore. There's been a couple of panels that have been repainted, but a lot of this paint just needed a little mop, and the plastic's been taken back to its original grey. It went all a bit sort of milky like they do, but you just don't see these anymore. There's loads and loads that have been scrapped over the years, but ones like this you just don't see them. Just open this really horrible fiddly catch, which you're bound to lose your nails if you've got long ones, and take a seat inside, where we find a nice
weirdly basic interior. You can tell this is a bit of a later car because the font on the dashboard's changed. It looks a bit like these really cheap computer products you buy from China. Sorry, 54, not 53,000 miles. We've got holes where some vents should be, no air conditioning. Callum actually put a clock in here because there wasn't one. It looks like original spec though, so it's great. Very, very simple heated controls. Original stereo. Ashtray here. With just a little plug for, the 12-volt socket. And then we have hazard lights, which the switch is the wrong way up for some reason. There are the rear wiper controls. The rear wiper on this car was an optional extra. It was not standard. Then the lights on here with a kind of sort of springy thing going on. If we start her up, so it's fuel injection, no carb. There would have been probably a choke lever about there on the older cars. See here what it sounds like. It's a bit noisy in here, but that's the lovely Cléon-Fonte engine, which we'll go and be taking a look at in a bit. So you've got, bizarrely, still got a warning for the choke, even though this car has fuel injection and a catalytic converter. But one thing is really interesting. If I put the indicator on, it actually is like an old Volkswagen, and that there's just one light, but it's two lights. So if you go left, both flash. If you go right, both flash. If you put the hazard lights on, both flash. How cheap is that? This dashboard looks like it's from a different car, because you've got this sort of blue area here, and then this grey plastic that's a completely different texture and everything. It looks like it doesn't belong in the car, but of course it does. The wipers, there is no intermittent function at all. It just goes up to a single wipe, and then down you've got a continuous wipe. It's really, really strange. Door pockets are big. I suppose they're a little bit, not a bit short, but in order to open the car and get out, you lift that up like that. Let's turn that off for a second because it's making this sort of whistling noise. But just two vents, manual windows, no internal adjustment for them. The door mirrors, you just got to poke your finger at them. And very fearsome looking handbrake. 5-speed manual gearbox. It actually feels alright. The clutch is a cable clutch, but it's okay. Probably because the car's done quite low mileage. Let's take a look at the Cléon-Fonte engine.
If you cast your minds back about a year, then what you'll remember is that for the Centerpod challenge that we did last October, Mr. Coleman, a rubbish mechanic, bought a 1987 Renault 11, which had pretty much this engine in it, and it's easy to see why the cars are related. You've still got this crazy sort of area where all this gunk and stuff comes through the leading edge of the bonnet and collects down there, which I'm sure is not good for rust prevention and things. And of course the bonnet opens to the front. That's an older design key for these cars. It makes the underbonnet access, I suppose, quite easy in some ways. And of course Renault 11. We've got a plastic cover for the battery, because you really don't want the water coming straight on top of your battery. It's not the best idea particularly. The coolant reservoir is interesting. It's just a sort of, I think it's a glass bottle of some description. No, it's plastic. It just looks a bit different from what these things are. Callum's done an awful lot of work under here. He's replaced a lot of the hoses. This cooling system's been flushed out because it was full of gunk. It runs really well. There's a little bit of whistle coming from somewhere, but that's going to be fixed soon before it goes on sale. And it's pretty straight under here, really. There's a little bit of surface rust on these strut tops, but really for a 1990s or really an 80s Renault, it's pretty good. everything's really accessible, and you wouldn't believe it has, you know, things like helical fuel injection looking top of there, but it does. Excellent. Right, it's time for more fingernail braking, and it's time for me to get in the back. So you just pull this lever here. It's easiest to have two hands. I'll just use this hand to do it, and there we go. Much better than a Mini. And we're in. Let's put that down. Yeah, there's actually a little bit of room. My head's right up against the ceiling in here, but the Clio that replaced this actually had less room in the back. It's, you know, very basic in here. We've only got these kind of plastic panels. I think those are speakers for the radio. I'm not actually sure if those are the speakers or those are the speakers. We've got the centre lap belt somewhere, and just some rubber floor mats. A little bit of carpet, but some rubber floor mats. But I just remember so many cars when I was growing up, getting in and out the back of them. And this is the kind of thing that they were like. Which means I'm getting old, viewers. Never mind, let's go for a drive. Right, viewers, Callum is in the back, it's on the other side because of, well, you know why, and we're going to go for a little drive. Cable clutch in this car, but actually it's pretty good for as far as these cable clutches go. Steering is much lighter than a Maestro, much lighter than a Maestro. It's also faster than a Maestro because we don't have an automatic gearbox in it. Engines available in a Renault 5 or the Super Sang anyway. We're a 1 litre with 42 horsepower, a 1.1 with 47 horsepower, a 1.2 with 54 horsepower. Then this 1.4, we believe this car is 60 horsepower, but there also were variants with 68 horsepower that was the automatic, and 71 horsepower. Then of course you had the crazy GT Turbo. Now the Phase 1 GT Turbos were 113 horsepower, and then the Phase 2s were 118 horsepower. Now you might think that in a car that would not be a fast car, but actually because this car weighs well under a ton. Oh, the camera mount's gone a bit funny there, I'll have to leave that, I'm afraid. Because this car weighs well under a ton, then it's pretty nippy. I reckon this will do 0 to 60 in about 12 seconds as opposed to the Maestro's about 14, 15. And actually it's alright. I expected the engine to be really noisy because it's an OHV unit, and the Cléon-Fonte or C-Type or Sierra engine, depending on the way that it goes. There we are, it's better. Cléon-Fonte engine, C-Type, Sierra engine, was introduced in a Renault 8 in 1962. It had a very long production life, and they used it in the Twingo, and also I believe in some versions of the Clio, so it kept going for a long time. The gearbox is surprisingly nice. Suspension's very typically French and very soft. I suppose with the turbo versions, then my grandmother's cousin did have a Renault 11 turbo, and he used to say "La turbo c'est magnifique" as he went on the autoroute at about 130 kph, overtaking caravans and terrifying us as he went along, because we were only little at the time and it was pretty scary. But this isn't actually that scary. It's actually very refined for a car like this. I mean, the engine doesn't make as much noise as I thought it. We're doing about 55-60 miles an hour on this single carriageway road, soaking up these bumps, and actually it's pretty pleasant really in here. It's not the quietest space because of a lot of the wind noise, the very boxy shape of this car. But the gearbox, the throw's quite long on it, but it feels really tight. I'm quite surprised actually how tight this feels.
Mirrors are better than a Maestro as well. You do have to poke your finger outside to adjust them, which isn't the best, but they do actually adjust to a way that you can actually see them, where they're quite low down. Although this car doesn't really share any genetic heritage as such with the Renault 4, it feels still very much like something like this. You can imagine anybody driving one of these, and I think the Renault 5 was very much aimed at all sorts of people. You could have the Monaco edition, which had a nice leather interior in it, and a 1.7 F-Type engine, which developed, I think, between 81 and 94 horsepower. That would be probably my choice. You get automatic in that as well, called the Befitting in other markets. But full leather interior and fog lights and electric windows, and if you're lucky, I think you can even get air conditioning with that. Right, let's turn the camera around and let's go back now. And of course, viewers, as always, there were some diesels in the Renault 5 range, but we don't talk about diesels on this channel. Got a different map position today. I'm just borrowing Callum's map actually, and it's working out really well. When I spent my year abroad at university, the first half of the year was at the Université Blaise Pascal, which is in Cléon-Fonte, and I was told that the managing director of Michelin, who are the largest employer in Cléon-Fonte, still commuted to work in a Renault 5. And this is in 2003, and naturally in Cléon-Fonte, the surrounding area, there were absolutely loads of these around, just everywhere. And if you're, off to the boulangerie, going up into the hills, things like that, this is your car. This is about as good as it gets. And if you went into the city, you'd see maybe, I don't know, an old GTL, GTX, Monaco edition, something like that, and that would be a little bit more chic. But by the time the early 90s came, this car looked embarrassingly out of date in comparison with a lot of the more modern ones. In 1990 was a big year when a lot of things had changed, and this silhouette, it dates back really to the original design for the Renault 5, which was in about 1970, and Michel Bouet, who was the designer of the original car, who sadly contracted cancer and died before it went on sale, I think had his first sort of prototypes in clay and in drawings by 67, 68, and it's amazing that fundamentally the external design of this car is really related to that. It looks really similar, and that's a design which persisted for about 20 years and still looks pretty contemporary in the mid 80s, but by the early 90s it was pretty much a bit of a relic. Another sort of example, I think, which the Dacia Sandero is very much like one of these. Obviously you can get power steering in in other models than this one, although I think you get used to the steering. There's lots of feel through it. It does produce some body roll, but you name me a little French Super Mini from the 80s that doesn't produce lots of body roll. There aren't any. It's just the way that it was in the day, and it's just a nice soft car to drive. It's pretty easy. Got to be much more aware of everything around you. Visibility, of course, as with many cars of the era, is absolutely fantastic. It's not particularly, me in this sort of base trim, and I would probably prefer a 5-door myself over the 3-door, but I do appreciate this car for what it is, and just seeing these around and knowing that my family, French half the family anyway, used to own things like this, I can see why they would have chosen it. And Obviously being a Renault, parts are everywhere. It's simple and easy to work on. There's no cam belt or anything in here. Right, let's park up and then we'll look at some Renault 5 trim levels. Right, let's look at some Renault 5 trim levels. So we've got TC, TL, GTL, TS, TSE, GTX, which is a bit like the Monaco with a few less features, a bit like a sort of, I don't know, Metro Mayfair, I suppose. GTE, Monaco. Monaco is a bit like the sort of Vanden Plas equivalent in the Renault 5 range. Campus, like this, Campus Prima. I think the Campus Prima was slightly more luxurious than this. And then of course the GT Turbo. So lots and lots of trim levels, lots and lots of choice. And you know, most engines were the C-type, Cléon-Fonte engine, then the F-type, which was the slightly larger one. And of course there were some diesels, and you know my opinion on those. So, the Renault 5 Campus. This is a car worth considering for your affordable classic on No Budget Reviews. Well, Callum's done a lot of work to this car, but it had an MOT when he bought it, and you know, there was some bits of rust and paintwork and you know, bits and pieces he's done to this car, but it did only cost £900. So, can you buy a Renault 5 with an MOT in all right condition for less than £1,000? Yes, you can. They're not exactly common. I saw one with terrible paintwork on eBay the other day, which hadn't quite reached its final price, but I reckon that's going to go for under £1,000. So yes, you can. It's not exactly what I would choose unless I had a Monaco probably, but I can see why a lot of people really love this. Callum certainly does, and as I mentioned before, this car's actually going to be for sale quite soon, and if you are interested in buying this, it's not going to be, you know, under £1,000. It'll be a bit more than that, and I reckon something like £3,000 is a sort of fair price for something like this in this condition. Then yes, by all means get in touch. japl745@hotmail.com. And it just remains for me to say thank you ever so much indeed for watching this episode of No Budget Reviews. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so for more of the same, to like this video and to leave a comment below. I've got an Instagram page, instagram.com/Lloyd_vehicle_consulting, and also Facebook, facebook.com/Lloyd Vehicle Consulting. Thank you.